Media filters. Now, if you read something by Chomsky, for example, Manufacturing Consent, there's a documentary and a book. He talks about media filters, and media filters are basically all the things that stop the media writing exactly what they want to write. And one of the big ones, for example, would be advertising. Now, newspapers get percentages vary, but newspapers get a large proportion of their revenue from advertising, same as TV stations. And we always think of adverts as being these quite often quite amusing things which break up films. I mean, I've never lived in America, but it would drive me mad to watch a film and see adverts every 5 or 10 minutes. It makes it very difficult to watch films, but advertising is important for other reasons, in that the advertisers would like to have a certain content in newspapers and on television. I will invariably talk about September 11 at some point. I did hear that an article appeared in The Guardian suggesting that, not that 9/11 was an inside job, but just that 9/11 had some anomalies. You know, that third tower which just collapsed and wasn't hit by anything? You know, do we dare to even say that there's anomalies? Apparently they lost £1 million in advertising revenue after that article was printed. So that's a good example of a media filter. Special interests, lobbies. You know, we hear a lot about lobbies, but isn't lobbying just bribery with another name? The same as collateral damage is killing of innocent civilians. You know, there's language, that's a whole other ball game, and that's The Smells Like Human Spirit. I think it's episode 4. They do a really good podcast about language. It's very important. If you read 1984, the conspiracy theorist's Bible, language is everything, really. The way something is presented. Another good example, which I've heard mentioned before, when they talked about Gaddafi in Libya in 2011, they talked about his compound. They bombed his compound, and of course members of his family were killed, but he was big bad Gaddafi. You know, I'm not saying he was a good guy, but the compound was in fact his house. Now, if you said today American forces bombed Colonel Gaddafi's house, that would sound a little bit different to compound. Compound makes it sound very clinical, military, you know, not a homely little house. So, some of the views I express in these posts will seem to the mainstream view to be negative or cynical, but I can assure you I'm full of positivity and love for the human race, and I see it as the ultimate positivity to want to get under the facade and seek the truth. I'm going to be posting on my blog about the cynic versus the realist. Now, this is another debate that I think people have been having for a long time. Is being cynical a bad thing? Again, it depends on the language. I see a cynic as someone who automatically looks at the negative without really looking at the evidence. They just have this negative sense, which usually I would say comes from issues they have in their own life. You know, you can normally trace everything back to the fundamentals of upbringing and things like that. The skeptic sees that the things should be questioned, particularly things which are given to us by our government, you know, based on their track record. So cynic or skeptic, you can decide, but I think being quote unquote negative, by the way, you'll see a lot of quote marks on my blogs, because I don't really believe in absolute definitions of words as well. I know that's going to sound a bit complicated, but there you have it. So something like negative. You know, negative for who? Is it positive to blindly go through life, filling yourself with entertainment every day while things are going on in the world, which we're now pretty much aware of, with this free flow of information, you know. Okay, I'm just going to carry on with reading the blog. Around 4 years ago, I had what is now referred to in alternative circles as an awakening, or awareness of certain issues. I wonder whether some people reading this or listening to this will know exactly what I mean, as they may have experienced something identical themselves. Roughly speaking, it was a realization through exposure to alternative information that nearly everything important I thought I knew and which I'd been fed all my life was, what's the word? Oh yes, bollocks. Note that I said everything important, not everything. It would be extremely difficult to feed people all total garbage. So what happens is that most of what we are told, percentage-wise, if you take stories in the newspapers, is probably accurate, but it's largely inconsequential. A good person with this is Tony Gosling, who used to work for the BBC and went independent. A good video on YouTube is Tony Gosling, Truth Juice 2011. I think it was in Birmingham. He does a very good talk on the media. The real fundamentals are in part a deception, and it all fits into a general mindset which keeps things the same, perfect for those with the real power in this world. Before this starts to sound like the paranoia of a conspiracy theorist who thinks that a few people meet in smoky rooms to plan world destruction, let me assure you that I believe that the vast majority of people in this world are decent citizens trying to get on with their lives the best way they can. My substantial travels have shown me that although having diversity of culture makes the world infinitely more colourful and rich, it masks the fact that we are all deep down extremely similar. The problem is that the system, or more accurately a vast array of systems, is a well-oiled work of utter genius in the way that it operates. It appears not to work, but in reality is working perfectly for the people who devised it. Not only does it rule people, the 99.9%, well done to the Occupy movement for introducing the idea of 99% and the 1%, but I would go slightly further. But of course 99.9% isn't quite as catchy. But it also manipulates them into policing each other like sheep with no need of a sheepdog. In my 4-year odyssey, I've read approximately 40 books, listened to around 500 hours of podcasts and interviews, and watched about 50 documentaries, some many times, on the general subject of how the world works. That's not meant to sound self-congratulatory, by the way. It's just I'm interested, and you tend to do something a lot if you're interested in it. There are many things that I don't know and have yet to research fully, but I'm also fairly confident in certain things that have started to become obvious and very apparent. And this has become apparent through reading, through listening, and through talking to other people. I have probably 6 or 7 friends in the world that when we meet, we don't just talk about the normal stuff, we get into fairly meaty topics, but at the same time we try and enjoy it, because I think discussion is incredibly stimulating, particularly when you're talking about quote unquote the truth. People have got angry with me, ridiculed me, and sometimes acknowledged me, but as you may know, the truth goes through 3 stages. That's a famous quote that I'll let you look at for yourself. The purpose of this blog is not to preach, but rather to share ideas and encourage investigation and learning. On the other hand, it's a free forum, so I will be expressing things as I see them while reserving the right to change my mind as new observations happen. I think this is a good thing. In the mainstream media, or if you're a celebrity, for example, and you express a political viewpoint and 6 months later your mind has changed, this is the ultimate sin, because someone will just play you, oh, this is what he said 6 months ago, look at him now, what a hypocrite. But actually, sometimes you change your mind, and investigating things further and further will bring up things that make you realise that what you thought was true may not be. It's called evolving. This would make me a bad person to follow and believe, and it's not my aim to attract this kind of attention. It's all about learning. I would like to suggest that if anyone is already thinking about making lifestyle changes and trying to investigate new perspectives, experimenting with boycotting television and mainstream news will allow a greater opportunity for critical thinking. And a bit of reading on media techniques will make it obvious that what you see on TV is an illusion, sometimes a malevolent one, sometimes just entertainment. I mean, that's it. I did a little bit of acting. I went to drama school and I just did a few amateur plays. And what goes on behind the scenes when you're making even an amateur play is often very eventful compared to what you're seeing. There's a great play called Noises Off, which has run in the West End for years. I'm sure it's still running. I don't know but it ran or is running for a long time. And it basically presents a play for the first half from the audience's perspective, and then it presents the exact same play but with the stage switch around, so you're seeing the perspective backstage. It's brilliant work in my opinion.